The ambush of two police officers will destroy the far left as support for BLM implodes. In this video, we're going to take a look at the horrific shooting of two police officers in Los Angeles, the outrageous response of BLM-like mobs that actually tried to disrupt the hospital from treating the cops, and how public opinion is decisively turning against BLM, promising the political defeat of the far left. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you as always. If this is your first time here at this channel, I post 2 videos a day analyzing current events and analyze some super awesome conservative trends so we can all live in the present in light of even better things to come. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. It'd be an absolute privilege to have you as a regular part of this channel where each and every day we together celebrate the collapse of left-wing globalism and the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age. But first, before we do anything else, make sure to click on that link below and head on over to my special website for my Patriot Food Supply. As we saw with the whole pandemic insanity, we cannot wait for an emergency to happen before we respond to one, and no one makes preparing for an emergency more ridiculously easy and affordable than my Patriot Supply. Gang, they're simply the best, and their food kits last up to 25 years in storage. They include breakfast, lunches, and dinners, and best of all, my Patriot Supply has a guarantee policy that will knock your socks off. And if you act now, you can save $100 off a full 4-week emergency food supply when you click on the link below to my special website. You heard that right, $100 off. So do not wait. I've got my food supply. Make sure you get yours. Click on that link below or go to preparewithsteve.com and save $100 off your very own 4-week emergency food supply today. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. I'm sure many of you have heard by now that over the weekend there was indeed a horrific ambush of 2 police officers in Los Angeles as they were sitting in their patrol cars. Video shows either a very short man or a child stalking the sitting car of the police officers and then turning to shoot the 2 deputies several times in the head. One of the victims is a 31-year-old mother of a 6-year-old child. But believe it or not, this is where the outrage actually just begins. Immediately after the shooting, bystanders who witnessed the shooting actually filmed themselves laughing at and mocking the deputies. Needless to say, they did nothing to help them as they were bleeding. As I understand, one of the deputies was cognizant enough to radio for help. And if that outrageous behavior weren't enough, a mob actually formed outside of the hospital where the 2 shot deputies were taken in an effort to block off people from actually entering in to the hospital. According to the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, these protesters were yelling, quote, "We hope they die," close quote. One of the agitators could be heard saying, "I want to deliver a message to the family of the pigs. I hope they effing die." Absolutely outrageous. By God's grace, these 2 officers appear to be pulling through. They are expected to survive. President Trump didn't even try to hide his outrage. Trump called for the death penalty to be enacted swiftly against the perpetrator once caught, and a $100,000 reward has been issued by authorities for any information leading to the capture of the shooter. And Trump's outrage at this senseless shooting, along with the heinous and disgraceful behavior of BLM-type mobs that mocked and accosted these police officers and their families, we can only imagine has enraged the nation. So what are going to be the political ramifications of this shooting over the weekend? Obviously, we're in the middle of a political season with the presidential election coming up. So we do have to ask the question, what are going to be the political ramifications of this? Well, I do not think you have to be a genius to figure this one out. This ambush and the abhorrent reactions by the mob gathered outside of the hospital may indeed have been enough to politically destroy the far left in our nation. Here's the fundamental problem for the BLM narrative that we're constantly seeing splashed across the teletrons at NFL games and NBA games that fewer and fewer people are watching, of course. When we see cops ambush like this, the narrative that BLM has been pushing shifts. It inverts. Since the death of George Floyd, the narrative involves police as assailants, right? Police are the aggressors. Police are the murderers or the perpetrators. And blacks, particularly unarmed black men, are the victims, right? That's been the necessary character arrangement for this BLM narrative to work. But now what are we seeing? And not just with this ambush. The ambush was horrible enough. That would have been bad enough. It's not just the ambush. It's the crowds, the mobs harassing the hospital that the police officers were being treated in for their very lives. And this is why the crowds are calling them pigs and screaming out that they hope that they die. It's actions like these that everyone is seeing and reading about. And so what this is doing is it's turning the BLM narrative upside down. Now BLM is the aggressor. BLM and BLM sympathizers are now the violent perpetrators. BLM is now the violator. And again, if this were just one person ambushing the police officers, that would be bad enough. But we now have mobs gathered at the hospital, basically calling for the police officers' deaths. And who are the new victims in this narrative? Who are the ones that are being brutalized and victimized and obviously blatantly discriminated against? Now it's the police. So the whole BLM narrative is inverted, you see. It's been stood on its head over the weekend. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but the number of police officers who've been killed this year is up 28% over the same time period from last year. This according to data from the FBI. And as ABC News is reporting, the riots that swept across the country in our cities after George Floyd's death entailed a massive rise in anti-police sentiment that manifested itself in attacks on officers, patrol vehicles, and precinct station houses, leaving cops around the country feeling under siege. And again, this is coming from the left-wing ABC News, no friend to conservatives, but they're admitting the kind of anti-police rhetoric and sentiment that has been fomented by BLM activists and agitators in terms of how they've emboldened these kind of offenders. Nearly 40 officers have been killed this year, and nearly 10 of them have been ambushed. All right, these are cold-blood killings. These aren't responses to police actions in the heat of the moment or anything like that. These are calculated, cold-blooded murders, killing police when they are most vulnerable. And so if the police are now the victims, what then is the political effect of all of that? Now, before we answer that, I want to make sure you know that we got a great gift for you. It's called our Fake News Antidote. It's a compilation of about 20 sites that I go to for my news each and every day, and you can download it completely free at the link down below in the pinned comment section. I think you're going to absolutely love it. If you're looking for alternative news sources that celebrate rather than denigrate the rise of a new conservative age all over the world, these are a list of your go-to sites that you will definitely enjoy. And it's absolutely yours, free, absolutely free, by clicking on the link below. It's my gift to you. All right, so what will be the political effect of this ambush and the outrageous reactions from the mobs that ensued? Well, we have to remember is that we all live by narratives, right? We all live by foundational belief systems that are generally in some kind of narrative form, or at least at some point they get put in narrative form. And these foundational beliefs are paradigmatic for how we live and act. They're foundational. And so we can posit that most people who have supported BLM up until now, certainly those who were part of the bandwagon, the groundswell support after George Floyd's death, when support for BLM surged past 50% of the poll population, we could posit that that support was not paradigmatic. It's technically known as syntagmatic. It was a support that was derivative of a more paradigmatic narrative that what happened to George Floyd was symptomatic of systemic racism that police officers were somehow the guardians and defenders and purveyors of, okay? So in other words, what happened in Minneapolis proved that blacks are victims of a police brutality that was indicative of a racist system that unfairly targets black people. Well, now, what do you think is going to happen in terms of support for BLM and the far left when that narrative gets replaced by a more paradigmatic, a more fundamental narrative, where now police officers are the victims and BLM agitators are the perpetrators? Well, I can tell you that virtually all the bandwagon support that BLM has gotten over the last few months is going to implode. It will disappear faster than it originally appeared. And add insult to injury, that erosion in support has actually already been happening even before this terrible shooting. It's an inevitable, I think it is an implosion of support that will inevitably get even worse. National support for BLM is cratering actually everywhere. There's simply no denying that more and more Americans are rejecting this movement. According to Politico, favorability for BLM has dropped 9 points in just the last few weeks. The website Civics tracks opinion trends over the course of weeks and months. We've talked about them before. And what we're finding is that opposition against BLM has surged by 10 points over the last several weeks to 38%. And support has dropped from a high of 53% to the current 49%. Overall support for BLM is now under 50%. And we pointed out that when it comes to sentiments towards BLM among whites, you could clearly see that a plurality of whites oppose BLM, 47%, which has been going up steadily. And if you break it down to white males, we can find that 54% oppose BLM. In fact, nearly 70% of white males either oppose BLM or they just don't have an opinion on it. In other words, they don't give a crap about it. In Wisconsin, where the Kenosha riots have ravaged businesses and properties and neighborhoods over the last few weeks, support for BLM has dropped 10 points from 59% to now 49%. Unfavorable sentiments has risen a comparable 10%, from 27% to 37%. Now, I think we all know how this story is going to turn out. The horrific ambush in LA of the two police officers, along with the outrageous mobs that formed outside their hospital calling for their deaths, will only aggravate and increase opposition against BLM, which, of course, spells political disaster for the far left come November. Now, before you go, make sure to like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to my channel. And you will definitely want to check out my latest video. I just uploaded it on how fans just absolutely booed BLM as the NFL has gone full-blown woke over the weekend. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.